Welcome to High Cheese. It's Friday, July 5th, 2024. And I hope everyone had a nice holiday celebration yesterday. And just one observation I had from watching the celebrations of July 4th. And again, this is just my observation. And it was encouraging to see the people of the inner cities coming out and celebrating July 4th and understanding what it's all about. And to me, this is encouraging. It's encouraging for Donald Trump. It's encouraging for America because the people of the inner city value what it is to be an American. They seem to get it versus the people that are in charge of these cities. They just don't get it. And that's the schism that we have in these inner cities between the people and the people in charge. And again, did I say this bodes well for Donald Trump in November? So let's go on to the big story of the week. Supreme Court came back and said that presidents are immune from criminal prosecution for actions they take in their official capacity as president. And this is common sense. This is something that we should not be surprised about. But the left, they're apoplectic. The first knee-jerk reaction is, oh, look, Donald Trump's going to be able to send SEAL Team 6 after his enemies and murder them. Now, do they really think their voters are going to buy into this? Some of them will. They just hate Donald Trump. They just think that Donald Trump's going to start killing people that he doesn't like once he's in office. But that's what they want you to believe. But the Supreme Court said that actions that do not fall under a president's official capacity are not covered by immunity. And that makes sense. Now, what they added is that on these issues where it's a gray area, whether an action falls under a president's official capacity as president or not, those on the fringe, the gray area. Well, the Supreme Court came back and said that we have to give presidents the presumption of immunity in these cases. And essentially what that means is that in these gray areas, the Supreme Court said, well, in order to protect the president, we've got to give them the benefit of the doubt. So moving ahead, we're going to give the presidents, not just Donald Trump, any president, the benefit of the doubt on these fringe decisions, the gray areas. Now the left is coming out, no, nobody is above the law. And they love to pin that on Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not above the law. Well, no president is above the law. But one thing that stuck out for me is in Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion. In that concurring opinion, kind of tamps down on this Democrat position that no one is above the law. Well, Clarence Thomas came back and, in his opinion, said that presidential immunity is the law. We have to give presidents some kind of immunity from their decisions. And this protects Obama, well, previous presidents too. Were we going to haul George Bush into court for the fiasco he created in Iraq? Were we going to haul Obama into court for killing innocent people in his drone strikes? No, the president needs immunity on these things. And this is just common sense. But the left and the Democrats, they're just trying to spin this to keep their low information voters hating Donald Trump. So what does this mean for Donald Trump's two cases? So in the Washington case, the Supreme Court remanded these gray areas back to the judge, Chutkan. And she's going to have a hearing and decide on whether some of these fringe decisions by Donald Trump actually were covered under immunity or not. You know, for example, the speech he made on J6 saying, I want you to peacefully protest. Well, she's going to have to make a decision on whether that was covered under presidential immunity or not. Now, we know what she's going to do. She's going to say, no, none of this is covered by immunity. Now, Trump's defense has another bite at the apple. They can take it back through the court system, through the appeals court, and it could wind up back in the Supreme Court, and then they'll make a decision on it. Now, another thing that came out of this decision, again, it came from Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion. And in it, he said, Jack Smith, I got my eye on you. I'm not sure if you were legally appointed as a special prosecutor. And that's an issue that we may have to take a look at in the future. Now, it wasn't part of the decision, but it was included in Thomas's concurring opinion. But he said, I got my eye on you, Jack Smith. Now, according to the Constitution, special prosecutors have to be appointed by Congress. Jack Smith never was. Jack Smith was working at The Hague, and then Merrick Garland just appointed him as the special prosecutor to go after Donald Trump. But Thomas's point is that Merrick Garland did not follow the Constitution on this, because these special prosecutors have to be appointed by Congress. And I think Thomas made the points that said, well, wait a second, can any private citizen bring up a case against the President of the United States? That's what we're doing here. They have not followed the Constitution in doing this. And by not doing this, you're creating an environment where where any private citizen can go after the president. Now, the funny thing is that down in New York, over in New York, Judge Merchan has postponed Donald Trump's sentencing. Now, there's two reasons why he did this. One is that he's like, oh, no, we've got an issue with Joe Biden. We don't know if Joe Biden is going to be the president. I may have to answer to a new master. So he's just pushing this out until it's further determined whether Joe Biden is going to be the actual candidate as president. And from a political hack standpoint, he's taking a step back. He goes, well, wait a second. I'm not making a rash decision here because I may have to answer to another group of people in power in a month or two. That's one of the reasons he pushed it out. The other reason he pushed it out is that this immunity decision affects his case in New York. Now, there were several items that the prosecutors put into evidence that Donald Trump's defense team said fall under presidential immunity. And they had petitioned the court, and they had petitioned the appeals court to say, hey, let's postpone this, because there's a case moving ahead in the Supreme Court that's going to determine presidential immunity. And we think it's the prudent thing to do is just wait instead of allowing things that we think are covered under presidential immunity to be used by the prosecution in New York. And Merchan said, nope, ain't going to hear it. We're moving ahead. I think they appealed it to the New York Supreme Court, too, and New York said no. So now what happened is that Trump's attorney said, well, wait a second. We told you this was going to happen, and we need your sentencing date to be postponed so we can make a case that the entire decision should be dropped. And guess what? Alan Bragg's office agreed, because they also, like Merchan, they also need time to figure out who's going to be in charge in the next few months. Who am I going to answer to in the next few months? Now, there's an outside chance that Merchan could just set this decision aside. And if that's the case, Donald Trump's not a convicted felon. You're only a convicted felon once you're sentenced. Now, quite frankly, I don't think that Merchan's going to do this. I still think Merchan's going to try to sentence Donald Trump to jail, some kind of home confinement, something that's going to impede him over the next few months going into the election. So we shall see. Now, I want to play a clip here. It's with Wesley Hunt. Wesley Hunt is the congressman from Texas. And in this interview, he's recounting the meeting that Donald Trump had with the Taliban. And after it was announced that the United States was leaving Afghanistan, Donald Trump met with the Taliban in the White House. And if you can remember at the time, all the Washington insiders, all the deep state people were saying, oh, what is this? President shouldn't be meeting with the Taliban. But this is what leadership is. This is what Donald Trump provided to the American people, to the office of the presidency, leadership. And after I play this clip, I want to go into a couple of other items and how this relates to this week's immunity decision by the Supreme Court, as well as last week's decision by the Supreme Court to cut back on the powers of the administrative state, the deep state. So let's go to this clip, and then we'll come back and discuss.
President Trump looked at the Taliban leader and said this: I want to leave Afghanistan, but it's going to be conditions-based withdrawal. And translator translated. And he said, if you harm a hair on a single American, I'm going to kill you. And the translator goes, and Trump goes, tell him
Yes.
Tell him what I said. Reached in his pocket, pulled out a satellite photo of the leader of the Taliban's home and handed it to him.
Shut up.
Got up and walked out the room.
Sure did.
Do you know for 18 months not a single American was killed in Afghanistan?
And this is what strong leadership is all about. But this is not what the deep state, the administrative state, want out of the executive office. They want to be calling all the shots because it benefits them. It benefits the deep state. It benefits the people in Washington. Now, just imagine this. Instead of Donald Trump sitting there, you have some bureaucrat, Department of State, for example. What do you think the bureaucrat will be saying? Well, if you hurt somebody, we're going to sanction you. We're going to put some economic sanctions on you. You know how far something like that goes with butchers? They couldn't care less. But what they do care about is that Donald Trump would have killed the leader of the Taliban if a single American person was hurt. And you'll never get this kind of leadership from the administrative state. They want a weak president. They want a president that is nothing more than a glorified member of Congress. They don't want people to be leaders. Now, they love to say, oh, this country is a country of laws. Yes, it is. It's a country of laws, but it's also a country of men and women and leaders. And they don't want that because it's self-serving for them. Because they really don't care about Americans. They care about their own power. They care how the defense contractors are going to respond to the American policy in Taliban. And you'll never get a bureaucrat saying that because they'll say, that's above my pay grade. Well, who's above your pay grade? Well, the defense contractors, the people I answer to, and the bureaucracy, people that hold power over whether I can move forward in this deep state. That's what they want. And as a result, you get terrible foreign policy. You get wars because it's not about us. It's not about having a leader that cares about the American people. It's about protecting the people in Washington. And this is why this whole decision by the Supreme Court last week about the administrative state is really, really important. It's the elected officials that make these decisions. It's not the faceless bureaucrats that's never been elected that couldn't care less about the American people and they only care about their own power and whether they're going to move up in the ranks in Washington. And this is why I think it's been a really good week. And I want to contrast Donald Trump's Taliban position with Joe Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan. Soldiers were killed. We left Americans there. Billions of dollars of equipment was left behind. It was a total embarrassment for this country. And it all came down to we have a weak president and we have these bureaucrats that have taken over the executive office. Taliban had no respect for the United States, no respect for the office of the presidency, and had absolutely no respect for the bureaucrats they were dealing with. And then they had hearings later on about the disaster of the Afghanistan withdrawal. And the Department of State claiming, well, you know, we had a communication problem with the Department of Defense and vice versa. No one wanted to take responsibility. And that's what happens in a bureaucracy. No one's responsible for anything. And when you have a weak president like Joe Biden, you have chaos. And that's why these people love bureaucracies, because ultimately no one's responsible. Everyone has their own objectives, but there's nobody there to make a final decision. And that's by design. American soldiers were killed. And it was absolute embarrassment for the United States and the Biden administration and the deep state. Oh, I'm getting so much enjoyment out of watching the Democrats eat themselves. Now, it's still up in the air whether the Democrats are going to replace Joe Biden. He doesn't want to go. Jill doesn't want him to go. Hunter doesn't want him to go. Now, just as a sidebar, one thing I read a report on is that Hunter Biden was sitting in on presidential briefing meetings. Really? That should not be. But I digress. So where was I? Oh, yes. The Democrats eating each other. Joe Biden doesn't want to go. Jill Biden doesn't want to go. But there are other forces inside the Democrat Party and the deep state that want him to go. Simply because they realize he can't beat Donald Trump. Now, if he was up in the polls by 10, 15 points against Donald Trump, they would all be fine with him. Oh, you know what? We've got a doddering old fool in the White House. He's winning, so what? But some kind of resolution has to be made before the Democrat convention. Now, I know behind the scenes the Democrats are working on how they can rig the system at the convention in order to replace Joe Biden. I think that's what's going to happen. You know, I would be surprised if, Biden resigns or says he's not going to run. But here's what gets me. You've got all these Democrats out there, and they're saying, oh, Joe Biden's got to go. He's too old. He can't handle the job. And it's all about the politics. Not one of them ever mentioned anything, well, it's not good for the country to have somebody like Biden in office. No, it's all about politics with them. It's all about power. Nothing about the country. But what do you expect? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I'm really enjoying them eating themselves. Now, the one thing I heard is that Biden had called in a bunch of governors into the White House to discuss, supporting him. And they all came out and said that, oh, no, we support Biden. I guess they had Whitmer from Michigan say something. And this is a week after she questioned whether Biden should be the nominee. You also had Gavin Newsom come out and say, oh, I support Joe Biden. Now, here's a guy that's been running a shadow campaign over the past 2 years to run for president. But you know what? I liken this to an owner of a professional sports team that comes out and says, we have full confidence in the manager of our team. And that's right before they axe him, right before they fire him. And this is what I'm liking all these comments about Joe Biden right now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting. And again, I still think that they're going to replace Biden at some point. Now, look, his health, he may stroke out. You know, he has serious health issues. He is such an old 81-year-old that he could have a stroke, heart attack, who knows? And they really should be concerned about that. But here's one thing I do know, and they took this right off the table day after the debate. They do not want RFK Jr. They do not want people considering RFK Jr. as a replacement. And if you notice that all the negative press that has come out about RFK Jr. over the past week, it's not a coincidence that they're attacking him, because they are sending a message that they don't want RFK Jr. to replace Joe Biden. I don't think that RFK Jr. would take it, but you never know. Now, you see these articles, these attack articles come out against RFK. And, one article, they're mocking his vice presidential running mate for some of the comments she made in a Rolling Stone interview, where she said that they're fighting demonic forces not only in our institutions, but in our culture. And they're mocking her for this. And another thing that came out, that there's a picture of RFK Jr. supposedly eating a dog. He's eating the cooked carcass of a dog. Well, it wasn't a dog. It was a goat. Then you've got another story that just happened to come out where his former babysitter from, I guess, 25 years ago, she was 23 at the time, she's claiming that RFK made some inappropriate advances at her. And then the final story that came out is that his campaign has money problems. So this didn't happen by happenstance. This was coordinated. This was sending the message to everyone that don't consider RFK Jr. So we shall see. And I want to read an article here. It's taken from the Gateway Pundit. And the headline says, jury rules in favor of freedom. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee ordered to pay almost $700,000 to an employee fired for refusing to take the COVID vaccine. In a landmark decision, a federal jury has ordered Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee to pay nearly $700,000 to Tanya Benton, a former employee who was terminated for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine based on her religious views. Benton, who served as a biostatistical research scientist, asserts that her role involved minimal client contact and no necessity for physical presence at medical facilities. Throughout her 16-year tenure, Benton primarily worked independently and remotely, especially during the pandemic. And here's the relevance of this article. The relevance of this article has to do with who's going to protect democracy. There are so many voters, particularly independent voters, who did not like these mandates, these vaccine mandates. They did not like the fact that the White House was pressuring corporations to pressure their employees to take the vaccine or get fired. This shouldn't happen in a democracy, particularly when the vaccine did not stop the spread of the virus. And this is why Donald Trump is up in the polls regarding who is the better candidate that is going to protect democracy. People don't forget this stuff. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is Steve Bannon. He started his 4-month sentence on Monday. And I wish him well. And he's funny. He said, anybody that wants to send me letters, don't send me letters because I'm not going to read them. What I want you to do is I want you to focus your energy on getting Donald Trump reelected. And remember that. And with that said, thank you very much for listening. You have a good week, and I will talk to you next Saturday.